And hello from Damien O'Meara. You're very welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. We are here comfortably nestled between match day 2 and match day 3 of Rugby World Cup 2025. Irish international Hannah O'Connor's with me here in Dublin, and having swapped the glamour of Toaster last week in bright, beautiful Brighton is Neil Treacy. How are you, Neil?
I'm very good, Damien. How are you, Hannah?
Good.
Not too bad, guys.
Listen, we'll get the initial tourist board stuff out of the way. Your early impressions of Brighton, you were very, very positive about Toaster last week. So if you had the choice now, Brighton against Toaster for your summer holidays, which one would you go for?
I'd be saying Brighton for the summer holidays anyway. I'm staying right across the road from the sea, which granted is looking fairly wild out there this afternoon. I'm only about a 5-6 minute walk down from the Ireland team hotel, which is also just right along the pier at Brighton, and I'd say it probably took me about 15 minutes to just walk straight down the road this afternoon because the wind is absolutely wild out there. The ocean's choppy as hell. It was bucketing rain earlier on this afternoon. It's blue skies at the moment, but do you know when you get that combination of the sun coming out right after the rain? I was nearly blinded for about 10 minutes when I came into the hotel this afternoon. I forgot my sunglasses and I had to just kind of take a few minutes to settle back in. But no, aside from that, I got in yesterday evening to Brighton, had a lovely little walk down by the beach. It's a cracking town. I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more over the next few days.
So there we go. That's the Brighton tourist board satisfied within the first couple of minutes of the podcast. So speaking of satisfaction, big win for Ireland. Hannah, placing the knockout stages of the tournament secured. It was interesting to listen to the radio coverage on Sunday and listening to Michael Corcoran talking about the fact that there was no jubilation afterwards. Is that a sign that this squad are simply where they expect themselves to be, or in what part is it perhaps a little bit of dissatisfaction with some of the performance element the weekend just gone, albeit a very comprehensive victory?
Yeah, I think you saw the two sides of it. I think the initial post-match feeling was that disappointment of shipping those 27 points and in the manner of which they were conceded. But I think when you let the dust settle for a minute, at the end of the day, you got to celebrate the fact that it's Ireland in a quarter-final with the match to spare. It's exactly what they would have wanted straight out of the blocks when this draw and this group was kind of announced. So very much job done. So I think they probably grounded themselves a bit more and kind of brought themselves back to that present moment of, yes, we've earned this spot. Let's celebrate being here because this is a big deal for us, having missed out on the last World Cup completely, to be at this stage of World Cup. So it's great.
Neil
and Damien, I might just follow in on that and just what Hannah was saying. I think that's exactly how it actually did play out on Sunday. The atmosphere on the pitch straight afterwards was probably a little bit muted, just because there was probably a bit of a frustration that they'd got themselves into that kind of a shootout of a game. But as you say, when the dust had settled, probably about half an hour, 40 minutes after full time, we were down in the bowels of the stadium waiting to do interviews with Scott Bemand and with players as well. And when Scott came out, we could clearly hear the celebrations coming from the Ireland changing room. Once I suppose everything had settled in and they realised that they were there and locked into a quarter final, that's when the celebrations came out. There was huge cheers all around for Linda Dugan winning her 50th cap as well, and a lot of singing coming out of the changing room. So I'd say the pictures maybe on the TV probably might have told a little bit of a lie, because there were big celebrations in the changing room from what we could hear.
And Neil, when we look at the performance itself, the three of us sat here last week and we thought there'd be very few changes. We thought he'd pretty much maybe one or two minor changes, not to the extent that he did. So in hindsight, was it always going to be inevitable that there's going to be areas of that performance that aren't going to reach the optimum? It's not necessarily going to be an improvement on match day 1 because you've so many new partnerships in there.
Yeah, and to be honest, going into that game on Sunday, once we knew there were that many changes, I was expecting it to be a little bit patchy in parts, just because of the chopping and changing that went on. It was put to Scott Bemand after the game that did some of the errors from that game potentially come from making so many changes, and can you put 2 and 2 together to make 4, and in that situation. And it was something he kind of bristled with, pointed out the fact that ultimately they scored 7 tries. They've booked their place in the quarterfinal with a game to spare. So he said he thinks he got that one right. Ultimately, though, it's like there are a lot of things they won't be happy about. The fact that to give up 5 tries to a Spanish team that didn't have a huge amount to offer, aside from just physicality, that'll sting as well. And just getting themselves into that kind of a scrappy game will be something they'll be, I don't know, just looking back and just putting a magnifying glass over the last couple of days.
But at the same time, Hannah, it's a Spanish team that would have had Ireland in the diary as the scalp that they were looking to take in order to progress to the knockout stages. It's a Spanish team that had beaten us the last time we played. So do we need to assess where Spain are at relative to the rest of the European teams that we play, or am I Am I looking to put a positive on it where it might not necessarily exist?
Yeah, look, you put, and it's important to highlight those positive spins of it being in a quarterfinal of a World Cup, and that's the big spin. And I think that's why you saw such a shift in the girls from that initial post-match kind of downer of where they know they can be and get the confidence from. It was letting Spain live in the game. As Neil said, they hadn't got a hell of a lot to offer, and that's no disrespect to them. It's just where they are in terms of their programme. We spoke about last week and how kind of propelled Ireland are along on their journey. So I think from a Spanish point of view, they shouldn't have really been within as much touching distance as they were. And as I said, had they earned those tries, like Neil said, if they had actually earned the right to score with some beautiful rugby and not through Ireland's own unforced errors, through giving away penalties, through giving easy yards, to getting caught at line-out time, then you could say that, you know, okay, they earned their shot at it. But the fact that they didn't, that's what's kind of most frustrating.
From a player's perspective, coaches and players will always talk about those areas being within their own control. Those areas are quick fixes or easily fixed. Like, did we see errors that occurred in the Japan game fixed for the Spanish game, or did we see them maybe worse execution of some elements of it?
Like, it's funny, Neil, saying obviously that Scott Bemand isn't, you know, going to take the lack of cohesion as something, and obviously never going to kind of announce that, and you're going to back your players in that. It's hard for the girls too. From my point of view, I was surprised when it came out to the extent of how many changes there was. I think that cohesion piece, especially around the pack, and we saw it in the early stages in this Japan game, the pack were completely in sync. We had a really tight, cohesive maul, really good go forward straight off the bat. In the Spain game, first maul, the ball gets caught above the bodies of the maul, and Sam is left to bail it out to Cleena Maloney, who has to tip it on outside to Grace Moore and Claire Bowles, and all of a sudden we turn it over because it's not quite part of the plan. We got it going a little bit better, but those little things of, like, say, peels from the mauls and distribution, it's that little bit of cohesion and the lack of kind of synchronicity between people that caused that a little bit. So yeah, I think from that point of view, I was surprised at the swaps, and I think you're going to have those changes maybe causing the little bit of kind of disjointed nature of things, but at the same time, the unforced errors, as you said, you need to be able to, I suppose, control them, and that's the worrying thing. Can you control them going into the next game? Yes. I think attack, you can have an off day. I was chatting to Michael Corcoran about it. You can have an off day and attack and flick a switch, but for the defence, it's that confidence piece that you're more like, it's harder to kind of get when you don't have it.
But Neil, at the same time, we've talked on this, you know, on the podcast before last week about the momentum that this squad have behind them, and some of the players, there's just this beautiful youthful freedom of not having had bad days in a green jersey. Do we need to commend them for the fact that they weathered that storm that Spain created in a time where maybe this squad in the past might have collapsed somewhat more?
Yeah, and I think there have been portions of both of these first two games where you could probably point out it's one of those things which is more worrying or which is more valuable. The fact that they've gone through a kind of a period of 10 or 15 minutes in each of these games where things have started to look like they're falling apart, and errors compounded by errors and quick tries being conceded. But ultimately, they have been able to fix it in the moment. They needed a bit of luck to do it at the weekend. It was, you know, they were trying to settle things down with a penalty kick in front of the post that comes back off the post. Then they get another penalty and they go down the line, and it's an overthrow and it's lost over the back. But ultimately, it's a Spanish knock-on that kind of just gives them that bit of luck backwards. And in fairness to them, when they had that opportunity, then they were clinical and they took it, and they got over for that third try to just weather that little storm. And by halftime, they'd got out to their bonus point lead. So I think there is a huge amount of credit in the fact that they had to go through really, really difficult periods in each of those games, and they came out the far side and they fixed those problems in the moment. And I think if we look back to 2024 against New Zealand, like, every time New Zealand hit them with a punch, they countered straight away as well. There were various times in that game where it looked like the Black Ferns might actually pull away. But each time Ireland rallied and got it done.
But the question, and again, without any disrespect to Japan or Spain, and I appreciate that Ireland are growing into this tournament, but if they can cause Ireland that difficulty, what will a France or a New Zealand or some of the other teams that you're going to meet coming down the tracks do if Ireland don't tidy that up?
Yeah, and it is just tidying up, and I think we saw it in kind of the warm-up games after the Scotland game. We saw the class of a team like Canada come out the blocks and just execute the areas where Ireland had been showing weaknesses around the pillars, around the rucks, being able to kind of pinpoint those areas where we were a little bit kind of found out against Scotland. So, like, I think the girls have it in their capabilities. I think it's probably difficult to look at the the Spain and the Japan game, yes, he got through them, he got the results. It wasn't perfect. And I think, as Neil said, you have to give massive credit for the likes of Spain hitting 2 tries in that middle period of the first half and Ireland coming right back. Yes, a little bit of luck, granted, but to hit back with 2 tries, settle the ship again going into half time. It was a bit of an up and down match, an eventful match. Not what you want really when you're the actual ones playing. For spectators in a neutral point of view, fantastic. But I think from going forward, yes, if you let those kind of many errors kind of in a game against the New Zealands and the France, then you're obviously letting them live in the game way too much and they'll sucker punch you more for it. But I think the fact that they've troubleshooted so well, as Neil said, they're going to have to come out of the blocks a bit more clinical to not have the same kind of errors creeping in.
Because that's one of the sticks that have been used, Neil, to beat this Irish squad is you look at the concession of points by the sides that have already reached the knockout stages, and at 41 points Ireland is the most vulnerable defence, and that's before we meet one of the so-called top tier nations. Is that an area we need to be really concerned about?
I think so, yeah. And it's funny, like the issue of defence was brought up again to Scott at the weekend, and about how narrow Ireland have been defending, and he was kind of trying to say he doesn't really think it was exposed too badly at the weekend. But I suppose where it's really going to come under pressure from New Zealand this week is their ability to get quick ball. Ireland have been really, really good over the last couple of games. I think they rank in the top 2 in terms of slowing down opposition breakdowns, whereas New Zealand have, it's either one of, if not the best, the fastest ruck speed in the competition. And if they're able to recycle that ball quickly and get it to the edge, that's where Ireland can be vulnerable and where Ireland's narrow defensive line can be caught out. And similarly as well, then I think where Spain really made Ireland look vulnerable at the weekend was just winning collision after collision after collision in the 22. And the more you do that, the more the defence has to come in and sacrifice bodies. And if New Zealand are able to get dominance there physically against Ireland when it comes down into the 2022, that's when they're going to have the numbers outside, and the likes of Portia, Woodman, Wycliffe is going to run in tries.
Yeah, it sounds ominous when you start to look at it that way.
It does, but I think, you know, the fixes that are needed will be a good wake up call for the girls going into it, and this week will be a big week for them.
And they will know this.
They will
better
know
than
this.
anybody.
They will know this better than anybody. But there's also an element of the whole country, and as I said, I'm part of numerous WhatsApp groups. The whole country has been talking about the New Zealand game. It was taken as a given that Spain and Japan we would get by, and it's hard when the girls, obviously they're not looking at that picture. They're very much in the present moment of the World Cup. But there's that chatter the whole time around it. And I'd say in every media, they've probably been asked some question about New Zealand in some roundabout way, etc. And the same for Scott Bemand, obviously. So there's that frustration too. It's always at the back of your head. Now they're in this week. They get to solely focus on this week. They're back to, in the next, hopefully, 2 games, playing, obviously, the big guns. They're back to solely focusing on that. They know exactly what they have to do. And as Neil said, if you want a nice reminder of what you can do, you go back and rewatch that game back over in Canada during WXV. Wanted to show what you can do. Quick ball being key that day. I think Ireland were up at like 58% for gold ball. That's 1 to 3 seconds in that WXV game. That's what they're going to need. We conceded 13 penalties that day, the last time we played New Zealand, and still managed to come away with the win. As Neil said, being able to really put it up to them. That physical fight. Yes, you're missing the likes of Aaron King and missing the likes of Dorothy Wall and possibly Aoife Wafer, but you got to talk about the here and the now and the girls that have had their chance to put up. There has been girls that have put up and shown that physicality, and there's going to be nothing like the present for this weekend. It's just a case of who he puts out for it. I would like to see us go with our strongest team out the blocks and make the changes you want at any stage then thereafter. Obviously, if everybody else fully fit, and hopefully Sam Monaghan, and then your Breen recover from their knocks, but go full hog from the get-go. Get the confidence in the defensive set. I think 2 things that stood out for me from what Scott said, and I'd heard him say it before in his post-match things, were that he was mentioning of, we're where we want to be now, fire shots, create opportunities to challenge a contender for this World Cup. That will be the line he will be using the whole time, is to fire shots, challenge a contender. The girls will be very much zoned in on that. Yes, it's not a must-win game, but the amount that the girls can get out of it can do untold confidence for them heading into that quarter-final.
Neil, is it ridiculous to talk about
Damien,
this as a free hit?
If I could just follow on from what Hannah was saying there, and the important, I think one of the big elements of this as well, like it isn't a must-win game.
Yeah.
They have an opportunity now at the weekend because of the work they've put in these opening 2 games and the 2 bonus point wins that they've had, and they've qualified for the quarter-final. If their defence is exposed this weekend, look, it happens. It's an opportunity to road test what they have and fix the problems ahead of a quarter final. So if it doesn't go to plan this weekend, look, it's not the end of the world. There's still going to be a tomorrow, and they're going to have an opportunity to fix it ahead of a quarter final. And what better way to test yourself out for a quarter final against the world champions?
So is it a free hit?
It is. I would like to say yeah. I'd say yes. I think they would be a lot more comfortable going in with that free hit mentality. They won't have a free hit mentality because it's a test match at the end of the day in a World Cup. But you'd be a lot more comfortable going in if your defensive picture from your first two games was a stronger. So I think they'll rise to the occasion. I do think they'll rise to the occasion and get what they want out of the game. You'll hear that hopefully come through.
Or is there a danger, Neil, that we're being defeatist in talking about going in as a free hit against the team that we beat the last time out?
No, I don't think so, because I think like you've earned the right to have that free hit. And like if, for example, if Aoife Wafer isn't viewed as 100% fit this weekend, you don't have to play her. If it was a must-win game, you are going to play her next week. It's an opportunity to see where you stand ahead of a quarterfinal. I would say, ultimately, which game do you want to win? It's this weekend or next weekend.
Yeah.
It's as close as you can get to a free hit in a World Cup. Obviously, if they go out this weekend and if the players treat it like a free hit and as if there's no consequences and they're not tuned in and they're not ready for the game, then that could have ramifications heading down into next week. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the attitude will be there, and I think they will be looking at this in terms of opportunity rather than cost.
Yeah, and I think you subscribe to that view that months out from the World Cup, when the one show did the draw, they'll have been looking at Japan and Spain as the way of securing your quarterfinal place. So they're exactly where they expect to be. They're exactly where the plan has been for them to be. So there's no sense of... There's always a pressure, but there's no sense of having to do something really big this week.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, it's where you want to be. And I think that's why we saw that shift in the mentality from the girls in the kind of the post-match immediate media to when they've come kind of have a minute to the dressing room or in that circle to kind of compile your thoughts as a team, get the messages from management. You got to live in that moment because that feeds your confidence as well. That feeds the body language. That feeds everything for the week, that we get to go into this exciting week, throw the shackles off, throw some more different pictures out of New Zealand and use it as our markers, Neil said, and as Scott Bemand said in the thing. Get your shots in, see where you fare against a title contender, because come quarter-final time, if you want to make it the rest of the way, it's title contenders all the way. And
Neil, that's going to be an interesting element of how both sides shuffle their deck this weekend. So was it 7 changes for Ireland last weekend, 11 changes for New Zealand, so both coaches freshened things up last weekend. So a lot of this game is going to be defined by which variation of their best 15s we're going to see on the field of play from the start.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if we don't see pretty close to both teams at full strength. Maybe the odd little player here or there might be rested. Maybe it might be kind of like 95% of what a full team would represent. But I think that you want to keep that momentum going in a World Cup. New Zealand obviously would be like, they were scarred after WXV last year, and I think the fact as well that they obviously. It's fascinating to look at the stats pack ahead of this weekend. The first line on it points out how Ireland have a 2-1 head-to-head record against New Zealand in history. They're the only team out there who have a winning record against the Black Ferns. That sort of stuff doesn't sit right with people in New Zealand rugby in the men's or women's game. So I would absolutely be expecting them to be coming out and trying to make a statement against Ireland this weekend. From an Irish point of view, obviously, as well, what way to set yourself up going into a knockout stage than to go back-to-back against New Zealand 2 years in a row.
And I think you knew the magnitude of the game. Yes, we knew that this third game, hopefully, from an Ireland point of view, was going to be as it is, a non-winnable game. But then the magnitude of the game, as Neil said, what it means to New Zealand and what it means for Ireland, the history that goes there between this fixture and the fantastic record Ireland have, again, doing it at the big stages like a World Cup gone before and like obviously WXV won. But then you have the likes of Ruby Tui stirring the pot by throwing out her comments that Ireland are going to throw the game anyway. If you needed anything to fuel the fire, you've got enough of it in buckets. It's a big game when there's those kind of comments floating out the week beforehand in the media. I'm
living in fear though of if we remember again, if we draw the parallel with the men, the men beat New Zealand in Chicago, and then I think half a dozen of them were nearly hospitalised when they arrived back in Dublin just the next time round. So listen, I hope that's not the case this weekend.
On part of that as well, Damien, it's interesting. I'd be curious to get Hannah's take on it as well. We've spoken in the past, Hannah, about how a lot of this team had the experience of playing in Twickenham a couple of years ago in front of whatever it was, 50 or 60,000 people. And sorry, you were one of those as well, obviously.
PTSD, I blocked it from my memory.
Yeah. But I think the kind of point of what we were saying was the huge crowd, etc., isn't going to phase them and the occasion of it. What I'm really looking forward to seeing this weekend is at the Brighton and Hove Albion Stadium, or whatever it's called, in terms of the World Cup. It's thereabouts a 30,000 stadium. Looks like it's sold out ahead of this weekend. My gut would say that it's going to be Ireland fan. The majority of people there in terms of neutrals or Irish fans are probably going to be cheering on Ireland, because it's, you know, if it's a lot of English supporters there, they're probably going to be cheering for the underdog ultimately. Throw in the Irish crowd, which are flying over from nearby. This is going to be a first time that, like, these Ireland players are going to be playing in front of such a large crowd that's supporting them, rather than, you know, being at a Twickenham where it's a 95%
and
English crowd.
that's a huge part of it, where I know we say like the free hit mentality. It's so not going to be a free hit mentality in the way they're preparing for this game, because first of all, as you said, all of those factors, it is going to be like that, essentially like a Crow Park feeling for these girls to come. Because when, as you said, when we played England in Twickenham, you are aware of the magnitude of the crowd, and it's class to be there and class to play in that atmosphere. Granted, the result, we just won't talk about that part. But when you're in those moments of playing
life is about experiences.
I know, yeah, it's great. It's great that was my last memory, but we'll bleep all that out. We'll cut all that out in editing. But that experience of it, you're like, this is class. You're like taking it all in, but it's very much like it's an England crowd. Whereas now, as you said, every man, woman and child seems to be going over to Brighton this weekend. Or when you were lining up back in summer when you were talking, are you going over for the World Cup? And everyone's like, yeah, going over for Brighton, going over for the New Zealand game, going over for the New Zealand game. Everyone is going to this game. So that crowd, as you said, even if there's English people there, they're not going to want New Zealand to win. So there's an extra, you know, an extra incentive there of anybody, as you said, who's there will get behind the girls, and it should be a sea of green, which adds an incredible atmosphere, and it's going to be class. And the girls are aware of that. They can finally get to this week and actually talk about the game, acknowledge the game. It's here. The one that they've been looking for is here. So I think this is going to create such a buzz. On top of that, you still have girls that desperately want to put their hand up for a quarter-final place. Anyone who gets a sniff, it's your chance to put your hand on that jersey for the 23 that are going to get the crack when it comes to the match that's the must-win. So that's a big part of it as well.
We spoke last week about the 8 players who hadn't been involved in the matchday squad. Now, we'll discount Aoife Wafer because of fitness, so 7 players.
Yeah.
Who stood up for you last weekend who might really force Scott Bamand's hand, if anyone?
I know Eleanor Perry was involved. I think her starting and Cleena Maloney McDonald starting.
Player of the match.
Yeah, and I think to get a prop, I think any group that I'm in with some props, they were delighted that a prop gets the nod. It's not often you get a prop to get a player of the match, so you know you're doing something right with the impact you're making. Both at set piece time, but around the park, she surprised me. And I said, not surprised me, I suppose I just didn't know as much about her. But the contribution she brought on field was immense, obviously, and deservedly player of the match. I think obviously Anna McGann is going to give Baven Parsons a run for her money in terms of that, you know, wing spot as well. Obviously the back row, you saw the shuffles, but probably in terms of, you know, the front row was being the most interesting thing now. He's kind of used Cleena Maloney McDonald off the bench in recent games, but I think herself and Elle Perry definitely made a shout for themselves to be starting alongside Linda Dugan come this weekend. And I said, you want that consistency. Yes, if someone has a niggle, you're going to rest them and mind the bodies for that. But everybody wants to play. And
Neil, that is exactly what Scott Bemand and his coaching team would have wanted when they made those 7 changes last week, is to say, listen, this is a 32-player squad and all 32 have the capability of forcing my hand and being a part of the selection. There's no tackle bag carriers here.
No, there isn't. And it's something we spoke about him last week as well, where I think that was his 21st game in charge of Ireland. He hasn't named an unchanged team yet since he took over in 2023. And whether people agree or disagree, he keeps players on their toes in terms of selection. Sometimes we don't really know where some of these calls are coming from. Myself and Han have been talking about scrum half for the last 3 weeks. Nobody ever knows who's going to be starting there. I think we're just about settling on the fact that Emily Lane seems to be the bench option for over the course of the last year, and it seems to be one of either Molly Scuffle McCabe or Aoibhinn Riley starting. Then across the wider squad, as Hannah mentioned as well, you've Hannah McGann and Baven Parsons in a proper contest on the right wing. Elle Perry has put her hand up in the last couple of weeks with some brilliant performances, and Cleena, as we mentioned as well. Then you throw in Fiona Chute, who's been excellent, having moved into the back row in the last couple of weeks. I know she played the majority of last weekend's game back up in the second row after Sam Monaghan had got injured. But yeah, there are a lot more options putting their hands up over the last, I'm going to say month, because you're including the warm-up matches and that as well.
Okay, so we're speaking in advance of the teams being named. We're speaking in advance of knowing if there's injuries or what the situation is regarding fitness. Your expectations then in terms of an end result, Hannah, at the weekend?
I would like to think that the atmosphere, it's one of those that the girls are going to rise to the occasion of. I think that's going to buoy them massively. Like Neil said, the crowd that's to be expected there is going to be huge. I would like to think that we can make it a close affair. If we can make it a close affair and get them into a battle again, obviously the wounded kind of beast that they are and the hauntedness that's kind of going around them from that defeat in Canada is going to probably come back with a massive bite from them, and they'll have a lot more respect as to who we are and who our players are that they didn't have in that competition. So there's that element. For it to be a successful outcome for Ireland, I think it's a good defensive shift. It's that for any entries we get into the green zone for scoring within the 22, that we take them. That we can keep, if we can keep within touching distance. But I think the most pleasing aspect will be for how many phases and how many ways we can make them go to plan B to think of how to score. We don't want to be ripped up through the middle, as Neil said. We don't want to be exposed out wide like we were. So if we can make them kind of like what Spain did to them, make them come up with a different way to score, make them earn it, then Ireland will come away with that confidence in the defensive picture going ahead of, you might think of France, obviously, for the next week. So
Neil?
I'm going to sound like a complete coach here, but I think this is one of those rare occasions where the performance actually probably is more important than the result this weekend. Particularly if, like, we're going to find out in the next few days. Obviously, it's still completely up in the air whether Aoife Wafer plays or whether Sam Monaghan plays. Monaghan went off with a hip injury at the weekend. I've seen the two of them moving around the hotel since they came back in from training. They seem to be moving around fine. They weren't properly training today. They did an indoor session rather than outdoors. So the media haven't had a chance to look at them yet. We'll get a glimpse at training tomorrow to see who is out there. We'll have an update coming from coaches and players a little bit later on this afternoon as well. So we're still probably a little bit in the dark as to who's available and what the level of fitness is for this weekend. I would say with Sam Monaghan, with Aoife Wafer, with Adele McMahon, even if she was carrying a knock after the Japan game or if she was just rested, I think if you've any doubt over any of those three, give them the day off, give them the opportunity to rest and recover, because you don't want to overwork them ahead of a game, ahead of a World Cup knockout quarterfinal match next week. And, you know, for a player of Aoife Wafer's ability, I know it's been spoken about, you want to get minutes into her legs. I don't think she's the player that needs to get minutes into the legs. I think when she's ready to go, and you're able to play her. So I suppose in a roundabout way, what I would be saying, performance probably more important than result. When you factor in as well, this is a New Zealand team that, on paper anyway, are better than they were last year. They've got their sevens Olympians back in there. They've got Georgia Miller, who looks like the best young rugby player in the world at the moment. Portia Woodman-Whitcliffe is scoring tries. They've Braxton Saracen McGee coming in a fullback, 18 years of age. He looked brilliant last weekend as well. They have a bit more X factor about them than they did last year. But look, performance over result would be what I'd be saying this week.
It's the biggest stage that the game has, and it's the time that you want to see the world's best players, Neil, do what it is they do so well. Portia Woodman-Whitcliffe, we've touched upon it on a couple of occasions, is like one of the New Zealand rugby greats. There's a kind of party would love to savour it this weekend, and the other party hopes she has the worst game she has ever had in a Black Ferns jersey.
Yes, I suppose the ideal scenario is she has one of the greatest games she's ever played and Ireland win.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. See, I like his optimism. Yeah, I like your optimism. Yeah.
You get a job in the coaching ticket yet, Neil?
Absolutely. Well, you see, I'm sitting around here in the lobby and there's players and coaches milling around, so I have to mind my P's and Q's. I think you wouldn't know who'd be hiding around a corner.
She's just phenomenal.
She's a freak of nature in the sense of how athletic she is. Like, she is your worst nightmare. She is pace and power together. And I heard some of the Black Ferns players comparing her to their Jonah Lomu and what she does. And like, you see clips comparing the two, and that same just attritional is like, if I can't go around you, which she often does go around you, she will go through you and make. There's so many victims of her handoff who have their poor pictures taken with their necks being reefed backwards. So nobody will want to be on the end of that. But like, you're playing a player like that, as Neil said, there's a wealth of players that are star quality, X factor quality there, that gets you up for a game even more. Even if you needed more incentive, is like to land a shot. I think I saw one of the Spanish players saying it in week one that they managed to either, hand her off, and they went away absolutely reveling in the fact that they managed to get a handoff against Portia Woodman. So I don't think our girls will be quite on that level, but they will be trying to get a one-up on her. And the girls, I think we're going to have an exciting battle between whoever we pick on the wings to go up against her. So
we've got the Ireland game then Sunday afternoon. We have obviously coverage on RTÉ Radio and RTÉ Television. The second most important game of the weekend is France against South Africa in Northampton, and ultimately our World Cup destiny, Neil, will be decided come the close of business Sunday evening.
Yeah, and I think it's funny coming into this week. I'm no longer 100% certain what the ideal scenario is in terms of an opponent, because I think coming into the World Cup, we would have been assuming France and Italy would be the two to qualify out of that pool. And I think you know straight away which one you want to play out of that too. But the element of surprise with South Africa and the fear of the unknown just kind of lingers in there a little bit. And I think for the last couple of years, there might have, ever since the draw for the World Cup was made, there nearly would have been a pin put in France as a team in the back of people's minds that could have been preparing for. I'm really, really looking forward to that game because I think worst case scenario from an Irish point of view, even if they do have to play France in a quarter final next week, based on what we've seen from South Africa so far, they're going to physically put France under a lot of pressure, and it could be very tired and
You want to just
France
basically
team.
beat them up, basically, is what you're saying.
Beat each other up.
Yeah.
Beat each other up. Absolutely take scalps out of each other.
He's an equal
and see
opportunity
what's
beater.
standing next week.
So just to put it in context for people, top in Pool C plays second in Pool D and vice versa. So currently, New Zealand, Ireland, 10 points each. New Zealand's points difference in Pool C far superior, but it's South Africa with 10 points leading France on 9 points in Pool D. We've got Lynn Cantwell to blame for all of this because Lynn's legacy, Hannah, ultimately is that that South Africa have made the strides they've made.
I know, and like what a stamp that she put on them. I think as soon as Lynn was over there, it was very much even within the player circle and within anybody involved in women's rugby in Ireland was hoping that the IRFU would do something to coax Lynn home to put her at the helm of women's rugby and to just have her voice and her vision behind it. And you can see everything they've done is testament to what she's been a part of in that programme that she's built them from, kind of similar to where Ireland have been at the rock bottom, probably New Zealand or South Africa on a greater scale of where they've come from and like the political nature of rugby in South Africa and all that they've done. And they said the performances they've put in, you know, from an athletic point of view, from a skills point of view, and the progress that they've made over the last few years kind of under her guidance before she's obviously thankfully come back to home soil with us is fantastic, and it's testament to her and the work, and I'm sure that she'll credit a big team behind it, but I suppose the structure she's helped put in place it's fantastic for them.
Neil, if there's to be one criticism of the tournament, like it was built to have all of these defining ties in the final round of pool games. We've got England qualified from Pool A. Like the likelihood that the United States will trump it, like it's kind of all defined. There's only one pool where we don't know definitely who the two teams have come out are going to be. In reality, we do. And do you have to ask questions about the structure of the competition and how they've scheduled these games?
To be honest, I don't think there's any actual solution to it, the way they could have done it. Because if you look back at the previous formats that this Rugby World Cup had, in 2022, it was a 12-team tournament, 3 pools of 4, and you ultimately had a situation where like 8 of the 12 teams were going through to a quarter final. We've seen it as we've seen in like GA and in the Champions Cup rugby as well. That kind of a split doesn't really do a competition any favours. You go back to when it was still 12 teams in 2017 and 2014, and it was even more cutthroat where it was the top 3 teams in each pool went through and only one of the best of the runners up went through. That ultimately just isn't a fair system, because whoever ends up with the real minnow in their pool is going to rack up the points, and they're probably going to pick off the best runner-up spot. Even if you're talking about the structure of the games in this tournament, even if we still had pools where the qualifying spots for the quarterfinals were yet to be fully locked in, I think ultimately we would have known who were going to take them regardless. You know, if for example, we still had Wales against Scotland this weekend to decide who was going through to the next round, I think we've seen how poor Wales have been so far. I think we all would have been assuming Scotland would head through. So I think we have got to a situation, at the very least, we're looking forward to a really, potentially really good game between New Zealand and Ireland to decide first place this weekend. I'm really looking forward to France and South Africa to see who goes through top and second place in that pool as well. The USA, England, Australia Pool A, that's going to be absolute mayhem. It's going to be a very interesting way to see it all unfold. Just who essentially, can Australia lose to England by fewer points than the USA did?
That was a cracking game, though, to be fair. That one between Australia and USA, must be said.
Yeah, but I suppose just the roundabout way I get to it, Damien, is that I don't think there is a system.
Yeah.
I think there's too much of a gulf between the top teams in the world and the rest, where I think regardless of whatever way you were going to put it together at the moment, the pool stages was going to be the pool stages. There wasn't, like, it was ultimately 8 out of a certain 10 teams were probably going to qualify, and you're looking at Wales and Italy being the two that miss out, or maybe USA as well. It's hard to really set up the pool stages.
And the trade-off on the other side is for your Samoas, your Fijis, your Brazils, other teams that are developing and are investing in rugby, they need to be exposed to this level, and they need to be exposed to the bigger teams to learn. And, I know it's a cliche, but cliches are often born out of the truth.
I know.
You need to play these teams to know where it is you need to go.
You do, and that's the thing, as Neil said, you put it into a 3-group thing and it's just too bitty. It's not like a proper World Cup feeling. It becomes all the permutations of people not playing a match to the full potential because of X, Y and Z. Yes, those teams that are, as I said, the minnows of these groups need to be exposed to it. We see it how long? It was only a few years ago that everybody was trying to kick Italy out of the Six Nations in the men's game. So swings and roundabouts, years will bring development, and as you said, exposing those teams to this level of rugby, this competition will hopefully fuel the fire for their kind of unions to get behind them.
And Neil, it's important to emphasise, it has been a really good tournament, and it is only going to improve from here on in.
Yeah, and I might just to say on that last little point and what we were talking about, if we think there isn't a huge amount of jeopardy now, wait for another 2 years when we're in Australia for the Men's Rugby World Cup and we're splitting 24 teams down to a last 16. There's not going to be a huge amount of jeopardy there, and there's if we're adding 8 more teams to that tournament, which is already a fairly top-heavy tournament, we're going to see some pretty one-sided contests as well. Ultimately, I think when we get down to the knockout stages of this, we are going to have some brilliant games. I think we're going to have probably 3 really good quarterfinals. I think you'd probably expect England to be breezing through regardless of who they play, looking most likely like Scotland as well. Although, again, I'll be really, really interested to see Scotland and Canada this weekend, because I've been impressed with Scotland over these last 2 games. So, yeah, to come around to it, I think it probably is actually still the best scenario to put these games, the potential pool deciders on at the very, very end, because I think they are the closest thing you're going to get to the best teams in each pool. Yeah.
We all love a permutation as it changes. Like it's like going back to the old days of the Heineken Cup, where everything changed, like every try that was scored and every penalty that was kicked. And listen, it's not going to be quite that dramatic, but there's going to be plenty to look forward to. Listen, Neil, I know you're heading off to get an audience with the Irish coaches and some of the players, so we'll read about that on the RTÉ Sport website and hear about that across RTÉ Radio. Enjoy the game at the weekend. Hannah, thanks so much for your company as always. Thanks to Raf and to Mick and all the lads behind the scenes. From Damien O'Meara, all of us here till we chat again. Goodbye.